Before we went to South Africa with Operation Wallacea, we worked together with teachers as well as representatives from Operation Wallacea and the team in the UK in order to make sure that we had everything prepared for the trip. This included understanding what our tasks were when we came there, also communicating our research questions and ideas about extended essay, if we wanted to do CAS, if we had friends from other countries. We also combined our group with three other students that came from another city here close by in Kristianstad because we weren't enough people so that Mr. Lastrup could come with us. But when they came with, we could all go together. Our plan really was just to go on the trip to get an experience, to see something different, live in a different culture, but most importantly, to try to help the cause of Operation Wallacea. Their idea of trying to help the environment is to stay educated about what we can do about the wildlife in South Africa as well as many other countries, since they actually send teams and organizations to, I think it's over 100 countries in the world. They work a lot with researchers and professors and close by universities, as well as those working on site in order to help the locals that live there, as well as try to fund ideas and other organizations and charities to help wild animals keep surviving in that environment. They also try to eliminate poaching and, most importantly, educate teens and adults about the dangers of not staying educated and informed about poaching, hunting, and illegal activities surrounding animals as well as nature, especially in countries where we're really facing a deficit in both the economic sense, but also in nature, since the world and the global warming is really affecting all of us, even though we might not want it. So it's really important that everyone tries to think about what they do and how that affects people. And it was something that was very clear from this trip was that even though we might do something here at home in Sweden, or in the US or in Canada or in the UK or Germany or anywhere where you come from, like using a straw, taking a cup, supporting one cause actually affects so many more people and animals and environments that you don't even think about. Understanding how the ecosystem develops alongside the humans in society is very important in order to develop further and try to work together instead of against each other. Malaysia work a lot in the local places with other people and locals in order to make sure that all the food and the staff, as well as water and facilities, are funded or rented by people that live in the area in order to give back to the community of which they're taking from. So we don't want to go to a place and just take. Instead, we want to go and we want to help them. So when we come there, we're giving people jobs, of course, in a good way, not like stealing jobs, but giving someone an opportunity to pursue something. For example, in South Africa, in the first week, we were in the savannah and we were together with a larger group we were from Brazil, from Portugal, we were the only Swedes there, but there were also from the UK. There were people from all around the world. And together we worked with a team of South Africans that were all tour guides. And most of them came from St. Petersburg, but some also came from a little bit further out. We also had a team that worked in the kitchen, and all of those were people that had their whole life wanted to pursue something within the culinary area, and this organization gave them the opportunity to do that without failing, without living without money, and they could also provide for their families and they got somewhere to stay. And this is really important for making sure that the community goes around, and it also gives students who might not have an open mind or international mindedness to see that there is actually development and economic development and industrial development in countries that you might not think. It was really a mind opener, I think, to a lot of people that especially those that we discussed this with in South Africa, that a lot of people thought that in South Africa especially it wasn't as developed as it is. when we were driving, we could see that there are a lot of buildings, a lot of people in suits working. Um, it's not just people living in huts on the street and they can't afford food, and there are water shortages and people are just dying of Ebola. Like, it's not that simple. Um, and Africa sure is a continent and not only a country. And South Africa is actually way more developed than most people think. So not only did this trip give us the opportunity to educate ourselves within how we can help the community with animals and how to stay safe, but also especially the globalization and how we can keep our minds open about different communities and things that aren't really close to home, and trying to stay. During our trip, we did a series of activities that um, were a part of a meta-analysis that they did on site together with Operation Wallacea as well as some other organizations. And this is to gain understanding and knowledge of where many of the animals on site are at all times. So what we did was, the first activity was bird counts. So we got up very early at like 4 a.m. and we would go out in these cars, and of course with a guide, an armed guide, and we would stop in a place and we were told to do a bird count for 10 minutes. And so there was one person who had a phone with a timer on it, and then all the other people were standing around in a circle with their backs towards the center. And their job was basically to listen and look for birds. And when they said one, they would try to identify the species. And of course, there were guides on site that would try to help us to say which species it was. And then this person would report back to those in the middle, and they would record everything. When those 10 minutes are up, we would look at what list we had, how many animals we saw approximately, and then we would head to the next site. This we would do for maybe 2 hours in the morning, and then we switched to another activity in the afternoon. We also did large mammal transects, which is what I wrote my extended essay on, and we went around in the same car with a guide, of course, as well, and we would try to look for larger mammals. And our job here was to be as quiet as possible, try to spot as many as possible, and give an accurate account of how old they look to be, how well the herd condition was, as well as the individual. Also, approximately how many there were, what time it was, and their exact geolocation. So this data is then later used by Operation Wallacea and then released to students like me writing research about these animals. And at the end of the day, then all of us contribute to a larger source of data about the animals on site and how they move around. And this is really useful for understanding how, for example, a larger mammal such as lions or elephants move around in the area. So in my extended essay, I talked about elephants, primarily how they interact with species around them. And then the large mammal transect is perfect because it tells me exactly what type of correlational relationship they have with each other. Did something that was very new. Since in South Africa, especially where we were, they had started to build larger teleprompters, sort of like larger structures that were man-made and not something that looked like it belonged in nature. So Operation Wallacea and the people on site were interested to see how animals have adapted to this. So they conducted this activity where we went out with an infrared camera and we would look for a nest. And the goal was that we would see activity through the infrared camera and therefore determine if the nest was active, and possibly we could see birds coming into it and leaving maybe eggs, something like that, or even a predator. So what we did was basically just go around and look at these teleprompters and find if we could see a nest, if it was active, and so forth. So with this activity, it's actually very important to the biodiversity and the understanding of the diversity in the area, because then we could see the effects that it had on the animals on site when man-made structures were implemented into their environment. So with that said, we worked a lot together with the guides to understand what man-made structures have caused in biodiversity as well as environmental factors for animals. So we talked a lot about poaching, we talked about hunting, we talked about selling, and even other activities in order to control the amount of wild animals in an area. Similar to Sweden, we have jaktsäsong, so this is when the hunters are allowed to look for certain animals, because if they're not hunting these animals, they will become a surplus and then therefore a danger for the people that live there. So they're trying to come up with a similar thing for those wild animals, such as elephants, lions, tigers, zebras, things like that. The second week, it was quite special since half of the group approximately did snorkeling, and then the other half did diving. So I did my diving to get my PADI certificate, whilst the others did snorkeling. And the ones that did not take their PADI certificate on site had classes and courses about marine preservation, awareness about ocean acidification, as well as not poaching, but taking and disrupting environments in the ocean, such as shells, fish, and other animals like whales, sharks, so forth. So what they did was actually in the end they did a research project into how humans have impacted this. And not that I participated, but I found it and find it quite relevant and interesting to know how the way that we act and what we do, what we throw away, what we consume, how that affects animals in the end. And this activity was really important to make people understand that this is something that we're given the chance to go snorkeling and diving in one of the most beautiful places on earth, and maybe in 20-30 years they won't be able to do that anymore because there won't be marine life. So it's really a wake-up call for most people to understand that they should stop consuming plastic, they should try to recycle and be a part of a community that wants the animal and marine life, both on land and water, to persevere and to develop alongside humans instead of trying to minimize one and maximize the other.